The desperate call. The emergency beacon that pierced through the quantum communication networks of the Galactic Council carried with it the desperation of an entire civilization. Ambassador Liara of the Zilani Federation stood before the assembled representatives, her normally pristine silver skin dulled with exhaustion and fear. The holographic projectors around the circular chamber displayed the horrific reality of her people's situation. Zilani Prime burned. The images showed cities that had stood for millennia reduced to smoldering ruins, their crystal spires shattered like broken dreams. The Vorthak Empire's warships hung in the orange sky like mechanical predators, their dark hulls scarred from countless conquests. These were not the ships of explorers or traders, but instruments of systematic destruction designed for one purpose: complete domination. Honored council members, Liara began, her melodic voice trembling with barely contained emotion. My people face total extinction. The Vorthak Empire has invaded our system with overwhelming force. Our cities are burning, our children are hiding in underground shelters, and our defensive stations have been destroyed. She paused, gathering strength from somewhere deep within her diplomatic training. We are a peaceful people. For over 2,000 years we have devoted our civilization to art, philosophy, and scientific advancement. We have never built weapons of war because we believed such things were relics of a more primitive age. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of translation devices working to convert her words into dozens of different languages and communication methods. Representative Thane of the Alterian Collective, a massive insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's light, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Ambassador Liara, what military assets do the Zilani possess? Surely your people maintain some form of defensive capability? Liara's head dropped in shame. We have none. Our ships are designed for exploration and commerce. Our technology focuses on healing and creation, not destruction. The Vorthak have 60 warships in our system. They have given us 5 standard rotations to surrender unconditionally, or they will begin systematic orbital bombardment of our population centers. Her voice broke slightly. 23 billion souls depend on the Council's response. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. The Vorthak Empire was known throughout the galaxy for their brutality, but they typically avoided complete genocide, preferring to enslave useful populations. The fact that they were threatening total extermination meant they wanted the Zilani's advanced technologies badly enough to risk galactic condemnation. Council Leader Vex, an ancient being whose species had helped found the galactic community centuries ago, consulted his datapad with movements made slow by age and careful consideration. The Council maintains 18 peacekeeping vessels distributed across 7 sectors. Given the distance to your system and current deployment commitments, we could authorize the dispatch of 3 ships along with a full diplomatic mission to negotiate with the Vorthak leadership. 3 ships? Liara's composure finally cracked, her voice rising to nearly a shout. Against 60 Vorthak warships? Council Leader, with respect, 3 peacekeeping vessels will be destroyed before they can even establish orbit around our world. Representative Kell of the Trading Federation shifted uncomfortably in her floating platform. Perhaps we should focus on evacuation protocols. My people operate civilian transport vessels that could relocate significant portions of your population to temporary colonies while we work on a longer-term solution. Evacuate 23 billion people? Liara stared at the representative in disbelief. Even if such a massive undertaking were possible, where would we go? What world could support our entire civilization? And what of our home, our history, our sacred sites? Would you abandon everything your ancestors built so easily? The question struck deep. Every species in the chamber understood the profound connection between a people and their homeworld. The idea of abandoning everything their civilization had created was unthinkable, yet the alternative seemed equally impossible. Hours passed as the Council debated. They discussed economic sanctions against the Vorthak Empire, diplomatic protests to neutral systems, and appeals to other military powers for assistance. But every option they proposed would take weeks or months to implement, and the Zilani had days before the ultimatum expired. Throughout the lengthy discussion, one representative remained notably silent. Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Authority sat in the newest section of the chamber, occasionally making notes on an old-fashioned paper tablet. Humans were the most recent addition to the Galactic Council, having been discovered only 3 years earlier when their exploration vessels made contact with Alterian mining operations in what humans called the Kepler system. Most council members knew little about humans beyond the basic facts contained in their admission files. They came from a planet called Earth in the Sol system, a world classified as a Class 9 death world with gravity nearly twice the galactic standard, extreme weather patterns, and predators that would terrify most civilized species. Despite these harsh origins, humans had proven remarkably adaptable, establishing colonies on 12 different worlds in just 30 years of space travel. During their brief membership in the Council, humans had been quiet participants. They attended sessions, voted on routine matters, and generally avoided drawing attention to themselves. Some representatives wondered if their brutal homeworld had made them too primitive for galactic civilization, while others suspected they were simply overwhelmed by the complexity of interstellar politics. "Captain Chen," Liara called out suddenly, desperation making her reach for any possible source of help. "Your people are new to our community, but perhaps you have some perspective we've missed. Any assistance, no matter how small, would be deeply appreciated." Chen looked up from her notes, her brown eyes meeting Liara's pleading gaze. She was typical of her species in many ways: bipedal, medium height, with the compact muscular build that came from evolving on a high-gravity world. Her features were pleasant but unremarkable, the kind of face that could blend into any crowd. What set her apart was the calm intensity in her eyes, a quality that suggested depths beneath the surface. "How long until the Vorthak deadline?" Chen asked in the direct economical manner typical of human communication. 4 rotations and 16 periods, Liara replied, using the standard galactic time measurement, roughly equivalent to 78 Earth hours. Chen nodded slowly and made another note on her pad. "I'll need to contact my superiors immediately. The Terran Colonial Authority has protocols for emergency assistance requests." She stood to leave the chamber, pausing at the exit. "Ambassador Liara, when humans receive a call for help, we take it very seriously. I'll make sure the right people get your message." As the human representative left the chamber, the other council members returned to their debates about diplomatic solutions and evacuation logistics. None of them paid much attention to Chen's departure. After all, what could one of the newest and least advanced species in the Council possibly do to help with a crisis of this magnitude? They would soon learn that they had made a critical error in judgment. The message from Captain Chen reached the Terran Military Command Center on Luna Base within 4 hours of leaving the Galactic Council chambers. The communication traveled through quantum relay networks that humanity had rapidly expanded throughout their territory, carrying with it the desperate plea of a dying civilization. Admiral Marcus Rivera sat in his office reviewing deployment schedules for the Colonial Defense Forces when the priority alert flashed across his screen. As Supreme Commander of the Terran Defense Navy, he received hundreds of routine communications daily, but this one carried encryption codes he had rarely seen. Immediate humanitarian crisis. Maximum response authorized. Rivera was a veteran of the Centauri Rebellion and the Martian Independence War, conflicts that had shaped humanity's rapid expansion into space. His weathered face bore the scars of boarding actions and ship-to-ship combat, while his eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had made life-and-death decisions in the crucible of battle. Like most humans who had reached command positions, he had earned his rank through proven performance under fire rather than political maneuvering. Chen's message was brief and direct. An innocent species called the Zilani faced total extinction from an aggressive empire known as the Vorthak. They had asked the Galactic Council for help and received offers of 3 peacekeeping ships against a force of 60 warships. The situation was hopeless unless immediate military intervention could be arranged. Rivera read the message twice, then activated his secure communication link to Admiral Elena Vasquez, commander of the 7th Battle Fleet, currently stationed at the Titan orbital shipyards. The connection established within seconds, Vasquez's sharp green eyes already alert, despite the early hour on Titan Standard Time. Marcus, this better be important. I was reviewing supply manifests for the Europa mining operation. Elena, we have a situation. Rivera forwarded Chen's message along with the intelligence data that had accompanied it. Read this and tell me what you think. Vasquez reviewed the information in silence, her expression growing darker as she absorbed the details. The Zalani civilization represented everything humans respected: peaceful, innovative, dedicated to advancement without conquest. The Vorthak Empire embodied everything they despised: aggression for its own sake, deliberate targeting of civilians, slavery and genocide as tools of expansion. How long do we have? Vasquez asked. Chen estimates 78 hours before the Vorthak deadline expires. After that, they start glassing population centers. Vasquez was already pulling up fleet deployment charts on her secondary screen. The 7th Battle Fleet consisted of 20 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and 2 massive carrier ships loaded with fighters and assault craft. It was one of the most powerful military formations humanity had ever assembled, designed to protect their expanding colonies from exactly this type of threat. The fleet can be ready to depart in 12 hours, Vasquez reported. But Marcus, this isn't our sector. These aren't our colonies. Are we really going to commit our entire 7th Fleet to protect complete strangers? Rivera leaned back in his chair, considering the question. Human military doctrine was built around protecting their own people first, but it was also built around a fundamental principle that had guided their species since they first began exploring space. When someone asks for help against overwhelming odds, you provide that help with everything you have. Elena, what do you think would happen if we send 3 ships like the Galactic Council suggested? 3 ships against 60 Vorthak warships? They'd be destroyed before they could establish orbit around the Zalani homeworld. And if we send nothing? 23 billion innocent people die while their planet burns. Rivera nodded slowly. The mathematics were simple. Half measures would accomplish nothing except getting good people killed. If humans were going to intervene, they needed to do it properly. Admiral, you have authorization to deploy the 7th Fleet to the Zalani system. Rules of engagement are weapons-free against any Vorthak military assets. Priority is protection of Zalani civilians and infrastructure. Understood? What about the Galactic Council? Should we inform them of our deployment? Rivera considered this. The Council expected diplomatic solutions and token gestures. They would probably try to stop a full military intervention, wasting precious time while people died. We'll inform them after we arrive in system. By then it will be too late for them to interfere with committee meetings and procedural delays. Within 2 hours, alarms were sounding throughout the Titan orbital shipyards. 7th Fleet personnel rushed to their ships as loading crews worked around the clock to provision the vessels for immediate departure. The massive carrier ships Endeavor and Resilience took on their full complement of fighters, while the cruisers and destroyers loaded every missile and energy cell their magazines could hold. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the heavy cruiser Defiant, watching the controlled chaos of fleet preparation. Her crew moved with the efficiency that came from years of training for exactly this scenario. They had drilled for rapid deployment so many times that the real thing felt almost routine. Admiral, her chief of staff reported, all ships report, ready for immediate departure. Engineering estimates 14 hours to reach the Zalani system at maximum hyperspace velocity. Too long, Vasquez replied. Engineering can push the drives harder than their estimates. We'll make it in 12 hours or less. As the 7th Fleet departed Titan orbit, other human colonies received similar alerts. Defense forces at Alpha, Centauri and Wolf 359 moved to high alert status, ready to respond if the Vorthak Empire decided to retaliate against human territories. Intelligence networks throughout human space began gathering information about Vorthak military capabilities and territorial holdings. The message sent back to Captain Chen was as simple as the original request had been. Help is coming. Advise, Zilani civilians to remain in shelters until further notice. Chen received the response while still traveling back to the human embassy from council chambers. She had expected acknowledgement of the request, perhaps an offer to send medical supplies or evacuation ships. What she got instead was a message that made her smile for the first time since learning about the crisis. Humans, Chen knew, had a different definition of help than most galactic civilizations. When other species offered assistance, they calculated minimum viable responses. When humans offered help, they calculated maximum possible responses. The difference was about to become very clear to everyone involved. Back at the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Liara continued pleading with representatives who offered sympathy but little substance. None of them noticed that the human representative had not returned to her seat. None of them knew that 50 human warships were racing through hyperspace toward a confrontation that would reshape their understanding of what it meant to ask humans for help. When humans answered the call, Commander Vrak stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Devastator, watching the systematic destruction of another Zilani city through the tactical displays. The Vorthak Empire had perfected the art of conquest over 3 centuries, and Vrak took professional pride in his efficiency. 47 worlds had fallen under his command, their populations either enslaved or eliminated based on their usefulness to the Empire. The Zilani had proven particularly valuable. Their medical technology could extend Vorthak lifespans significantly, while their energy systems could power entire fleets during extended campaigns. Vrak had already identified the key research facilities and manufacturing centers that would be preserved after the conquest. Everything else could burn as an example to other species who might consider resistance. Commander, his communications officer reported, "We are detecting hyperspace signatures approaching the system. Multiple contacts, unknown configuration." Vrak turned from the tactical display showing burning cities to focus on the new development. The Galactic Council had finally responded to the crisis exactly as predicted. Their peacekeeping forces would arrive, make diplomatic protests, and eventually withdraw when faced with superior Vorthak firepower. It was a pattern he had seen dozens of times before. "How many ships?" Vrak asked, his scarred face showing mild interest. "Sensors show..." "Sir, this cannot be correct. I'm reading 52 vessels, ranging from destroyer to capital ship classification." Vrak's expression sharpened. 50 ships represented a significant military force, far more than the Council typically deployed for peacekeeping operations. "Identification? Unknown design patterns, sir. Ships are broadcasting identification codes for something called the Terran Colonial Authority and demanding immediate communication with Vorthak Command." "Terrans?" Vrak consulted his tactical database. Humans were listed as a newly discovered species, primitive by galactic standards, from a single death world. Their inclusion in the Galactic Council was recent and largely ceremonial. The idea that they could field a fleet of 50 warships seemed impossible. "Open a channel," Vrak commanded. "Let's see what these newcomers want before we destroy them." The main display flickered to life, revealing the bridge of what appeared to be a human capital ship. A human female in military uniform stood at the center of the image, her posture rigid with barely controlled anger. Behind her, Vrak could see crew members moving with the disciplined efficiency of experienced military personnel. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Navy," the human announced without preamble. "You are in violation of interstellar law through your unprovoked aggression against the Zilani Federation. You will cease all hostile actions immediately and withdraw your forces from this system." Vrak laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through his bridge crew. "Admiral, I am Commander Vrak of the Vorthak Empire. Your 50 ships face 60 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Stand down and depart this system, or share the fate of the primitives you seek to protect." Vasquez's expression didn't change. "Commander Vrak, you have 1 minute to begin withdrawing your forces. If you do not comply, we will remove you by force." 1 minute? Vrak's amusement grew. "Human, do you understand the mathematics of this situation? You are outnumbered and outgunned by forces that have conquered half the galaxy. Commander, you made one critical error in your calculations," Vasquez replied coldly. You assumed this was going to be a fair fight. The transmission ended abruptly. Vrak stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his tactical officer. Begin targeting solutions for the human fleet. We'll make an example of them. Before finishing with the Zilani. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for decades to come. The human fleet didn't arrange itself in the standard battle formations taught at military academies throughout the galaxy. Instead, they seemed to appear everywhere at once, their ships moving with coordinated precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. The first Vorthak ship to die was the heavy cruiser Conqueror, destroyed when 3 human destroyers appeared from its blind spot and unleashed a concentrated barrage of kinetic projectiles and energy weapons. The massive vessel's shields failed within seconds, its hull cracking apart like an eggshell under the relentless assault. Impossible, Vrak's tactical officer reported. Their weapons are significantly more powerful than our intelligence indicated. Shield efficiency is down 40% across all ships. More Vorthak vessels began dying as the human fleet demonstrated tactical innovations that defied conventional wisdom. They used their smaller ships as coordinated hunting packs, overwhelming individual Vorthak vessels with concentrated firepower, while their capital ships provided covering fire and electronic warfare support. The human carrier ships launched fighters, unlike anything in the Galactic database. These craft moved with impossible agility, their pilots executing maneuvers that would kill most organic beings. They swarmed around Vorthak ships like angry insects, targeting weapon systems and shield generators with surgical precision. "Sir, we've lost 12 ships," the tactical officer shouted over the sound of alarm klaxons. "The humans are using some form of coordinated battle network. Their ships respond to threats faster than our targeting systems can acquire locks." Vrak watched in growing horror as his supposedly invincible fleet was systematically dismantled by forces that shouldn't have existed. The humans fought with a precision and ferocity that spoke of generations of warfare, their tactics refined by conflicts that had forged them into the most effective military force he had ever encountered. "All ships, withdraw from the inner system," Vrak commanded. "Regroup at the asteroid belt and prepare for concentrated bombardment of the human fleet." But the humans had no intention of allowing a withdrawal. Their ships pursued the retreating Vorthak forces with relentless determination, continuing to pick off stragglers and damaged vessels. Within 3 hours of the battle's beginning, the mighty Vorthak invasion fleet had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing toward the system's edge. "Commander," his communications officer reported with barely concealed panic, "the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding our unconditional surrender." Vrak's scarred face twisted with rage and humiliation. In 3 centuries of conquest, no force had ever defeated a Vorthak fleet so decisively. These humans had made it look effortless, their ships dancing through space like they were born to it. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human flagship." Admiral Vasquez appeared on the screen again, her expression as cold as deep space. "Commander Vrak, your invasion fleet has been neutralized. You have one opportunity to surrender your remaining forces and withdraw from Zilani space permanently. Refuse, and we will hunt down every ship that participated in this war crime." "This isn't over, human," Vrak snarled. "The Empire will send 100 fleets to avenge this defeat. Then we'll destroy 100 fleets," Vasquez replied with matter-of-fact certainty. "But they'll find the same thing you did today. Humans don't just help our friends, Commander. We protect them, and we're very, very good at it." The transmission ended, leaving Vrak staring at his tactical displays showing the scattered remains of his once mighty fleet. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to coordinate the evacuation of survivors and the withdrawal from what had become a death trap. On the surface of Zilani Prime, Ambassador Liara emerged from her underground shelter to find human dropships landing in the capital city's central plaza. The soldiers who deployed from these craft moved with the same disciplined efficiency she had witnessed in their fleet actions, immediately beginning search and rescue operations in the damaged areas of the city. A human officer approached her, positioned, his battle armor scarred from recent combat but his manner respectful and professional. "Ambassador Liara, I'm Colonel James Mitchell, commanding officer of the Terran Marine Expeditionary Force, Admiral Vasquez sends her compliments and asks if you require immediate medical assistance. Liara stared at the human in amazement. Colonel, how is this possible? The Galactic Council said they could send 3 ships, you brought 50. Mitchell's expression softened slightly. Ma'am, when humans hear that innocent people are being threatened by bullies, we don't send the minimum force necessary. We send enough force to make sure the bullies never come back. Over the following days, the scope of humanity's response became clear to the shocked galactic community. The 7th Fleet had destroyed or captured 43 Vorthak warships, while losing only 2 destroyers. Human ground forces had deployed to 12 different Zalani worlds, establishing security, perimeters and assisting with reconstruction efforts. Medical ships had arrived with supplies and personnel to treat wounded civilians, while engineering vessels began repairing the damaged orbital infrastructure. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address what many representatives called an unprecedented escalation of military force. Captain Chen found herself facing accusations of violating established protocols for crisis response. Captain Chen, Council Leader Vex began, his ancient voice carrying clear disapproval. Humanity was asked to provide assistance, not to deploy an entire battle fleet without consultation or authorization from this body. Chen stood calmly before the assembled representatives, her expression unreadable. Council Leader, with respect, the Zalani didn't ask for consultations or authorizations. They asked for help. We provided it. Representative Thane clicked his mandibles aggressively. Your people's response was completely disproportionate to the threat level. 50 warships against a regional dispute? Regional dispute? Chen's voice carried a dangerous edge. Representative Thane, the Vorthak Empire threatened to exterminate 23 billion innocent civilians. If you consider genocide a regional dispute, then humanity clearly has different definitions of acceptable behavior than the rest of this council. Ambassador Liara, attending the session as an observer, rose to address the chamber. If I may, speak, Council Leader. The human response saved my entire civilization from extinction. While this body debated procedures and protocols, human ships were already racing through hyperspace to defend people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank. For centuries, the Galactic Council had operated on the principle of measured responses and diplomatic solutions. The idea that a species would commit their entire military force to protect strangers challenged fundamental assumptions about civilized behavior. The question before us, Chen continued, is whether this council exists to protect innocent life or to protect established procedures. Humanity chose to protect life. We would make the same choice again without hesitation. Council Leader Vex consulted with other senior representatives before responding. Captain Chen, while humanity's intentions were admirable, the precedent you have set is deeply concerning. What happens when other species decide to take unilateral military action based on their own interpretations of crisis situations? Chen smiled slightly, the expression somehow making her appear more dangerous rather than less. Council Leader, I believe you're asking the wrong question. The real question is, what happens to species that threaten genocide when they know humans are watching? In the weeks that followed, intelligence reports began filtering in from throughout the galaxy. Aggressive species that had been expanding through conquest suddenly became much more cautious about their territorial ambitions. Slavers and raiders found their operations disrupted by mysterious equipment failures and communication intercepts. The Vorthak Empire, historically one of the most feared military powers in the galaxy, began withdrawing from contested territories and releasing enslaved populations. The reason became clear when intercepts of Vorthak military communications revealed new operational directives. Avoid all contact with human-protected territories. Species under Terran protection are not to be approached by Imperial forces under any circumstances. Ambassador Liara visited the human embassy on the Council station, seeking to understand the people who had saved her civilization. She found Captain Chen in her office, reviewing reports from the reconstruction efforts on Zalani Prime. Captain, I wanted to thank you personally for what humanity did for my people. The question my government keeps asking is, why? Why risk your entire fleet for people you had never met? Chen looked up from her reports, her expression thoughtful. Ambassador, let me ask you something. If you saw a child being attacked by predators, would you calculate the minimum force necessary to help? Or would you use whatever force was needed to make sure the child was safe? I would use whatever force was necessary, of course. Then you understand perfectly, Chen replied. From humanity's perspective, the Zilani were children being attacked by predators. We used the force necessary to ensure you would be safe, not just for today, but for as long as those predators remember what happened to them. Liara nodded, slowly, beginning to understand the mindset that had produced such an overwhelming response to her people's crisis. Captain, the Galactic Council seems frightened by what humanity is capable of. Are they right to be concerned? Chen considered the question carefully. Ambassador, humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We want to explore, to build, to learn alongside our galactic neighbors. But we also believe that civilized species have an obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves. If that frightens some members of this council, perhaps they should examine their own priorities. The long-term consequences of humanity's intervention continued to ripple through galactic politics. Species that had previously been victims of aggression began reaching out to human colonies, seeking protection agreements and mutual defense treaties. The Terran Colonial Authority found itself managing a growing network of allied civilizations, all drawn by the promise of security that human military might provide. More importantly, the very nature of interstellar conflict began to change. Aggressive species found themselves facing a choice: continue their predatory behavior and risk human intervention, or adapt to a galaxy where genocide and slavery were no longer tolerated. Most chose adaptation. In her final report to the Zilani government, Ambassador Liara wrote, "We asked the galaxy for help and received promises of 3 ships and diplomatic protests. We asked humanity for help and received 50 warships and the complete destruction of those who threatened us. The difference is not just in numbers but in philosophy. Most species calculate the minimum response necessary to appear helpful. Humans calculate the maximum response necessary to solve the problem permanently." The report concluded with a recommendation that would reshape Zilani foreign policy. I recommend immediate establishment of formal alliance treaties with the Terran Colonial Authority. In a galaxy full of predators, we have found the one species willing to be our guardians. When Captain Chen was asked by galactic media to explain humanity's dramatic response to the Zilani crisis, her answer became famous throughout human space. They asked for help. We don't know how to give a little help when a lot of help is needed. That's just not who we are. The galaxy had learned something important about humanity that day. When humans make friends, they don't just stand beside them. They stand in front of them. And they bring enough firepower to make sure anyone thinking about harming their friends reconsiders their life choices. As one Vorthak survivor would later tell his commanders, "We thought we were fighting primitives from a single world. Instead, we found apex predators who had turned warfare into an art form. Never again underestimate the humans. Never again." The Zilani crisis had ended not with diplomatic negotiations or gradual escalation, but with the simple human philosophy that some problems require overwhelming solutions. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. And somewhere in the depths of space, other aggressive species received the message loud and clear. There were new guardians watching over the innocent, and they hit back very, very hard.